Um, I know before the end of the show, I wanted to ask you about their pursuit of a sporting director, because obviously a lot of people thought it was going to end up being Christoph Freund. That then the reports where he had agreed terms, but then he decided not to join. What other direction are Chelsea going to go in now? Who are the other candidates that they're currently talking to, as far as you're aware?
So they've always had multiple candidates for the sporting director role on their radar. And we know that Michael Edwards was their top choice, but is not prepared to end his break early to join. And then after conversations where Chelsea were trying to sign Benjamin Sesko, they learnt firsthand, particularly Bowley, but also Behdad Eghbali from Clear Lake Capital, Chelsea's majority owner, that Freund was a really strong candidate because he's data-driven and he's been part of the Red Bull model. And the thing to understand about Chelsea's strategy here is they want multi-club ownership with Chelsea at the top. And they also want to find younger hidden gems at strong value that can get a clear pathway to the first team. And then within the multi-club model, because statistically only perhaps 1 in 50 will actually go on that journey from start to finish, the other 49 have the opportunity, if you've bought them, to go to sister clubs and ultimately be sold as well. So then suddenly you might have 50 players that you buy, all teenagers or less. And then not only have you got the ownership and control over them, and the ones that develop and end up at Chelsea naturally become stars, and you've saved a ton of money and you've got their loyalty, and they're all on long-term contracts, 6 or 7 years. And you see this in baseball as well. But there's also a business model for the ones that don't succeed. You're not buying a player because you know they won't succeed, but you're buying into the statistics of only a handful ever succeed. So the ones that are highly rated at the time you buy them that don't succeed, if you've paid 5 million, you still might get 15 million. And then if you times that 10 million profit on each player by the 49, I'm making up extreme numbers now just to provide an example so everyone understands, then that's 49 failed, in inverted commas, players that you thought were superstars that didn't make Chelsea, each of which still makes you 10 million. That's 490 million. And then the one that does make it, you've paid 5 million for, and they're a 200 million pound player. And then with that 490 million from the other 49, you've got money to invest to buy elite level talent that is already a finished product. But without the structure, without the pathways to test out the players, without the development, without the lure of that stability of a model, it can be a lot harder to persuade young players, particularly from South America, making long journeys to Premier League clubs where they think they're just going to be another statistic if they don't succeed. And then other names, Paul Mitchell is still in there. He's very keen on the job. He would take it in a heartbeat. There's no problem with him leaving Monaco, even though he's on the board. And he's had experience working within the Red Bull model as well. And I think that it would be a relatively smart appointment. He's perhaps not as data-driven as some of the other candidates, and that may be a factor that works against him. And then Tim Stairton is a candidate too, who's currently at Bayer Leverkusen, and Victor Orta at Leeds is another one. And Todd Bowley's already developed a relatively strong relationship with Leeds United as well. And the key question for Chelsea is, I think now, in working out how urgently they need an appointment with a view to January, because they're considering lots of different structures. So they may go sporting director, technical director. They may go sporting director, advisor. And because Todd Bowley's done this role, they may even delay. I don't think it's the most likely scenario, so I don't want to cause any headlines here by saying that my understanding is they will delay. But an option might be to bring in an advisor to build the model rather than get everyone that needs to work within the model, to use the fact that Bowley can contribute as well. And then that could give them the ability to wait for Michael Edwards. And I still think, it's only my personal opinion again, I don't want to overly sensationalize this as a headline. My personal opinion is, if Michael Edwards has said no to now, but yes to later, or even maybe to later, you go for Michael Edwards, full stop. and you do whatever you can to get through January and even potentially next summer, because he may not want to start until after next summer's window. But if Edwards is available, he is your right long-term appointment. He is worth the wait. But if you discount Edwards and they want now, or if they've actually determined that the recruitment decisions will be like Liverpool, but the model will be similar to either Red Bull or the City Group, then at that point, he might not be the right fit. And that's when I think they'll want to appoint quickly to have someone in place for January. So there's a few candidates. Ones that have been ruled out for now, Berta at Atleti, who was recommended by Marina. It'll be interesting to see whether they come back to that. But over the course of the summer, when they were talking to Edwards and others, Berta was not somebody that Chelsea had moved for. But the name has never really departed from Chelsea links. So still one to watch, but nothing at this point. Maxwell has been discounted, and I think rightly so due to the level of experience. So Chelsea, I think, need to determine first what the exact model is going to be. Because the thing with Freund is that he seems a fit because of the talent for actually spotting, especially a young player.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you've got to build the model as well. And Freund didn't build the model, the sort of way Red Bull works. It's
he's worked within it.
It's people like Ranieri, it's even people like the late Gerard Houllier, who was the head of football for the Red Bull Group before he sadly passed away. So do they actually need an advisor? Do they need a model builder? Do they need more of an executive to actually say, what is the strategy here? How's it going to be put together? Because then who you drop in it doesn't matter as much. Whereas if you bring in a Freund, of course, he's spotted players like Haaland before, but can he actually build the model from scratch? And who else do you need? And I think that's why ultimately the deal fell through, because Freund liked the job. He verbally agreed to the job. Chelsea thought it was a done deal. But as I understand it, the plan was to maybe raid the Red Bull Group for a few other key personnel. And also the other key thing is that he only just signed a new contract extension with Salzburg this summer. And my understanding is that there's no exit clause for him to leave now. The ability for him to leave contractually would only have been from a year after he signed that contract. So that made it harder for Chelsea because they had no outs. They had no ability to trigger an exit contractually. So they obviously agreed terms with Freund first, and then the Red Bull Group played harder ball. So I think the key for Chelsea at the moment is just to stabilise. They need calm. They need to head in a singular direction, which is why it's important to know exactly what the model is first before you make the hire. But the irony is when you're less expert and you've had that many outgoings at Chelsea, can they do that? Or do they need an expert in to drive the building of the model? Or can they determine the model in its specifics first and then find the right fit thereafter? And if they're talking to Edwards, then talking to Mitchell, then talking to Freund and so on, they're all quite different, which suggests to me, only from the outside in, that they don't yet know what their exact model is. They know that they want it to be data-driven. They know that they want it to be youth-based. And they know that they want it built quickly with a multi-club dimension. But beyond that, how many clubs? Where are those clubs going to be? What is the ratio between a youth siding and an elite level siding? Is it a transfer committee, or does the manager still have autonomy? What's the role of Carl McCauley? How quickly are they going to buy a club? Are those clubs going to be formally part of a group, or are they going to be informally part of a group? Are they going to be based upon loans? Are those loans going to be within the group? And if they're going to be within the group, then why? What do you benefit financially? Does the teams that you bring in within your group have any preferential treatment? And then how does that benefit the group financially? Are there any other clubs within the group that will end up playing elite level football, like the Leipzig-Salzburg dynamic that we see in the Champions League? And I don't think they're there yet, which is why for Freund, it's quite daunting. And that's why I think that they need to go and talk to model builders, not model operators, to work out exactly what they need. And then they'll have more clarity on recruitment.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense, you know. And if someone here said that he didn't spot it didn't spot Haaland out of obscurity. Well,
Mm.
but it's not obscurity as such. It's the fact that he was doing well at Mold before any. And this is the point about like the scouting systems, my friend, and what they put together at the RB groups. They spot these young talents quicker than other clubs because they're so good at what they do. So he saw him at Mold doing what he was doing, playing under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And before any of the other European elites had the opportunity to pounce, he was already signed, still delivered in the door at RB Salzburg. It's the speed of which they work. It's the fact that they focus so much attention on their scouting networks, recruiting quickly. And of course, they put some of the best in class in those positions who have great networks. That it'll be the yes, there's an element of scouting games randomly to a degree, but scouts often get called to games by people. So it's about how good your network is. Listen, you've got to come over to Norway and watch this kid play. We think he's something special.
Mm.
If you've got scouts that have got great networks that get the calls before other club scouts, you're in an advantage. And I think that's what it's meant. I mean, of course, people in the world knew who Haaland was when he was at Mole, but there's a difference between knowing who he is and then actively scouting him, talking to him, and convincing him to join. The only thing I think they wish they did now is add like some sell-on goal scoring bonus, so they were earning pounds every time he scored a goal. That would make a lot of sense. But
I think the thing briefly, Terry, is just that it's not about spotting, because there would have been loads of clubs that knew about Haaland, and it's not only a race to find first, because a player also knows their own talent and worth and will hold out for other suitors to learn about it, especially now in this digital age where you can watch a lot more, travel to a lot more places. The model is key, and stability and loyalty and pathways are three key elements to it that make it unique. And the fourth aspect of the Red Bull model, comparative to, say, Chelsea's, is that they reward that loyalty with eventually letting you go. So then spotting is one thing, but signing is another. And when you sign at the moment for the Red Bull group, you get told what your pathways are. You've got the ability to play regularly. You've got Champions League football. You're still well compensated. You know what your path is. And you also know that if you follow the model and trust in it, then eventually they'll let you leave for a club of your dreams. So Sesko is a great example of that, and even Vardiel too. But if you look at Sesko, he stays at Salzburg, which is what they wanted. Why? Because they are also thinking about things in football terms. Then he'll go to Leipzig. Why? Because he had a lot of other offers, because it's a step within the group, and he thinks that's right for his development at such a young age, and he'll get game time, and he won't get lost in a big dressing room, and he won't find himself in a new culture and environment. They're still looking after him. And then everybody accepts that beyond that, in a year or 2 or 3 years or whatever, Sesko will go somewhere big and everybody will win.